Field Marshal Lord Roberts is often thought of as a gentleman, but when he realized that the Boers were far from finished, he began to introduce a brutal, scorched earth policy. Destroy the farms and burn down the farmhouses. The British ignored the Hague Convention on laws and customs of war, and we exercised a monstrous regime. We constructed all over southern Africa what we unfortunately call concentration camps, and we drove many thousands of women and children into them. Eventually, Lord Roberts retired to England, and Lord Kitchener took over his command, and the brutality increased. Of course, not every British soldier sympathized with his country's ruthless determination to crush the Boer people.
Helped to do it.
What was that like?
Oh, horrible, horrible, heartbreaking to us as youths. It wasn't right at all, but you had to do it.
Why did you have to do it?
Orders. Orders.
The world looked at us British and despised us. Not untinged with envy, I am sorry to add, because we British were going to take the gold away from the Boers and not them. We British stood naked before the world and were overwhelmingly unashamed. The Boers had great moral heroes, and we had none. But that awful contrast was about to change. Of course, we British suppressed the truth about what was happening to the Boer women and children of South Africa, but rumors were floating around, and they reached the consciousness of a maiden lady who lived in Cornwall. Her name was Emily Hobhouse. Initially, she founded an organization which she called the South African Women and Children's Distress Fund, and through it she raised £300, and on December the 7th, 1900, she sailed from England for Cape Town. She paid her own fare, and she was not wealthy. She travelled alone. The Hobhouse family were not without influence, and she arrived here in Cape Town with several letters of introduction to Alfred Milner, the British High Commissioner. Miss Hobhouse was determined to know what was happening to the Boer women and children, and to help them, if help was needed.
That, Miss Hobhouse, might prove to be a little difficult. The military are in charge.
Oh, well, with all due respect, Sir Alfred, the welfare of all refugees, so I gather from Whitehall, is your ultimate responsibility. And public opinion in Britain and elsewhere is getting uneasy. My visiting with my gifts might help pacify the situation.
Sir Alfred Milner uneasily provided Emily with a letter of authorization to visit one large camp at Bloemfontein. Perhaps Emily Hobhouse saw herself as a Lady Bountiful, a do-gooder, as they call it these days. But when she entered this British concentration camp, she was confronted by hell on earth. Death and appalling suffering were all around her.
Emily calmly stated, "I call this camp system wholesale cruelty. It can never be wiped out from the memories of the people. It presses hardest on the children. There are two courses open to me: to stay among the people, doling out small gifts of clothes, or to return home with the hope of inducing both the British government and the British public to give help so that at least the Boer children might be saved."
What I heard from my parents, as they naturally knew her, they regarded her as a holy angel. So good was she to the people. She was a well-doer. They regarded her as an angel out of heaven.
Emily returned to Britain and began to create an international storm against the policies of British imperialism, and her outrage was ever supported by the Welshman, David Lloyd George. He said, "The Herod of old sought to crush a little race by killing all the young children. It was not a success, and I would commend that story to Herod's modern imitators." The Boer commandos were attacking the vast British army wherever and whenever they could. A favourite target was the railway lines, which stretched across the far-flung territories. Lord Kitchener was again forced to realise that he couldn't defeat the Boers in any conventional military sense, even with his scorched earth policy. So he and his imperial chums hit upon a new idea: build many hundreds of small forts called blockhouses, crisscrossing the great territories with thousands of miles of barbed wire, and in this method drive the many Boer commandos at them and thereby trap them. British intelligence informed Kitchener that Yvette and 1,800 fighting burghers were in an area of the Western Orange Free State. Kitchener placed 9,000 British soldiers in a straight line which stretched for 54 miles. The incredible line advanced westward at the rate of 20 miles per day. Behind Yvette was the central railway line with its blockhouses and barbed wire, which was additionally lined with another 8,000 British soldiers. And for full measure, there were 7 armoured trains constantly patrolling along the central railway line. Yvette, realizing the massive military weight which was organized to crush him, suddenly swung south with only 600 of his men and crashed through the southern line of blockhouses and barbed wire into his homeland, leaving a raging Kitchener far, far behind. And that was Christian de Wet. The Anglo-Boer War was now bitter attrition. Of course, the British casualties, wounded or dead, were reasonably looked after. But the social class arrangements of imperialism were ever present.
Those who lost their lives, unfortunately, they were sewn up in a blanket, which charged against their account by the government.
They were charged?
Yes, a man had to pay, yes. Out of, when he got his settling up money, the price of the blanket was deducted from any credit due to him.
That doesn't speak too well for England, does it?
That happened out there.